couple of years ago, I wrote a book called To Be Frank. It was a story about my father. The first part one, was about me discovering about his basic history, and decided to make a video of it. Growing up as the first generation of immigrants is funny because you only know stories of people from back home, and they're just names, you don't really know them. So it was an interesting time when it was time for my mum to go back to England and see her parents after such a long time. That's my mum and dad there. My mum's family. There's my brother and I went with my mother to see her mother, who she hadn't seen in probably 30 years or something like that. I can't remember the exact time. We saw her brother, Ray, who got a bit of a story about. And I also remember Susan, her daughter, probably because even though I was only 12, she was not much older, so you probably remember a kid in that stage. Yeah, from my father's side, there's a part I know now I didn't know then. The part we knew then, there was his brother, George, who I got my middle name from. He was a butcher, had no kids, spent a bit of time with him. And Anne, who is his sister, she lived on Scarborough with her husband, Howard. And I felt sorry for the poor old guy, to be honest. And I remember Roy for some reason. I don't know why I remember Roy, but I remember Roy. So they're the people I remember. So where we went to was Hull, with my grandma lived, and spent a lot of time with Auntie Anne in Scarborough. She lived somewhere there from memory. A few things I remember is Airy Bob's Cave. Got this picture on Google, and there's apparently Hairy Bob's skate park. So obviously the Airy Bob was Hairy Bob, and the cave was this carved out of a massive rock this guy lived in there apparently. It's probably gone now, who knows. Also Marine Drive, got a bit of a story about Marine Drive. It's a road along the base of the cliff, very low to the coastline. And so if you get rough seas, it's a pretty rough road to be on, Marine Drive. The story about Marine Drive was a story that my father's brother, George, told me. He said when they were young kids, they used to go to Sunday school in their Sunday best. And my father was a bit of a smart ass, which I can get that. And they were walking past Marine Drive, and his little, in their best Sunday clothes, which he dressed up in those days, his little brother said, "Hey, what's this?" He says, "Oh, that's a life buoy, and if you get thrown in, you throw it out to the person, and you save them. Here, I'll show you how it works." And he jumped into the Atlantic Ocean in the swell, and his little, probably 8-10-year-old brother's trying to lift this life buoy over the railing, and this policeman comes round and stops him, said, what are you doing that? You can't waste money, that sort of stuff. And he sees that there's a kid in the ocean, as far as he knows, drowning, and this little boy was trying to save his older brother. And so the policeman brought him in. They daren't tell the policeman the truth, and my father's brother became a hero of the town for saving his big brother, and they never ever admitted it otherwise. So that was a story of Marine Drive. Another story about Ray is when we went to England, we flew for about 24 hours, very long flight, very tiring. We arrived in London, and there's no one there to meet us. My mum's there late at night with these two little kids, not knowing what's going on. So she made the decision to get on the train and go to where she knows and she lives. And so we missed them down in London, so they had to drive all the way back up to Scarborough. And we're even more tired when we get out of there. And it's a misty night. It gets misty in England and very cold. And we're getting off this train, not where we're going. And down the bottom of this railway platform, this man, arms out like a friggin' plane, and he's a big guy, and he's running down the platform screaming, "Margaret!" like this. And I think there's something wrong with this guy. He's mental. My mum looks up, a little bit scared of this guy, runs, pelting down to her, picks her up. She was a big woman, spins around. Turns out that was Ray, frightened the hell out of us. That was a story about Ray. So the story of understanding, my father starts off when they lived in this house in Berkeley. And my sister told me there was this document, which was a document about, was served on a guy called Frank Donahoe, who was proved to be my father's father, and they wanted money. England was one of the first places to get people to pay to raise their kids, try and make society better, and all that sort of stuff. And this was served on him. And my father carried this his whole life, his whole adult life. And it was the one sort of link to who his real father was and that sort of stuff. And he didn't think much of it. So I read it, being a young engineer and a bit of a smartass myself, as it turns out. Wanted to solve this problem, of course you do. And then I read the back of it, so that there's the main information there. And there's the back of it, and it says that they gave the paper to his sister, who was an adult. And I thought that was a bit of a clue. And I asked my father about it, and he says, "What? What sister?" He says, "Oh, on the back." He says, "What do you mean on the back?" And at first I thought he was joking, and then it turns out he'd never read the back. So he'd carried this thing most of his life, and the only link to his real father, and he hadn't read the back. So I pondered that for a while, and it turns out my little brother Peter, came up with a great theory, because we had to come up about that. So I rang up the 10 Bar Street. It was a hairdresser. Well, they didn't know anything. Tried a lot of places, the newspaper, all sorts of stuff. And eventually I found this Family History Society, and this woman I emailed called Nina Pickford. And she did me a great favour. She found out who lived there by records at that time. And the promising lead was this guy called James Scalby. Now, it turns out James Scalby was a good one, because my little brother, his theory was that it wasn't Donahoe, because Scalby was the married name of the sister. So Frank Donahoe was staying with his sister. That was my little brother's theory. When I went through the census, which was only just released, and my sister tried earlier and couldn't find anything because the census wasn't released. So I tried when the census was released, and I found a couple of families it could have been. Found one that matched based on in 1921, Frank Donahoe was 21. Elsie Lil, his mother, was 25. And Edith Donahoe, who we think was Edith Scalby, if this is true, was 31. I found some births, deaths, marriage information through Nina, and bingo, that was right. So that was a great step forward. Went on a website called Genes Connected, and pretty quickly found the associated clan. There's Frank Donahoe and his 6 children, a few kids. Anyway, I didn't have the photos. I only got the basis and did the photos later, but that's the family structure I found. Then it was time to ring up. So I contacted this guy by email through Genes Connected, arranged a time to call him on the phone. He got 5 of his 6 brothers and sisters together in the house. I sent him emails about the story of birth certificates, the marriage certificates, and the story of how it's true. And it dawned on me then that I was the bearer of some pretty awful news, such that their father hadn't told them this story, and their father had kept it from them. So had to be a bit nice about the whole thing, but they were okay about it. Turns out they were quite skeptical, even though they had a lot of evidence. And the thing that really sold them was that they had researched their old family quite a bit. That's why I found them so easily. And they could not understand why the oldest boy in the families was always named Frank. And they couldn't understand that, or their family, that wasn't true. Turns out that was true because my dad's name was Frank. So that sort of convinced them a bit. They sent me a picture of this man, Frank Donahoe, which I showed to my father, and he went absolutely ballistic. All of the hate and anger and hurt over all those years, he took out on this photo. It was like a little 10-year-old kid throwing a tantrum and yelling and screaming. He really went for it. And I feel from a bit because at his age, everyone who he could whinge to or blame was dead. They were all gone. There was just him left. He was of that era. He was anyone left. The more information is that there was one sister missing, and she was actually in Australia, and they think she lived in Perth, and they think he was married. She was married to a guy called Tomlinson, but they weren't sure. Turns out they were sure. They were still a bit skeptical. Who was this mad guy that didn't want to sort of endanger their sister in Australia? So what I do, of course, I look up the phone book and find every single Tomlinson in Perth. Turns out there was 9. Rang them all up, either talked to them directly, but most of them left a message on the answer machine, said something like, "My name's Kevin Lill. I'm trying to find my father's real father. You could be his stepsister. If your maiden name is Donahoe, then you could be my father's sister." One person rang back. They a bit skeptical at first. Don't blame them. They rang their relatives in England because they were in constant contact with them and knew about them, and sent them all the information, and they were convinced. So they were flying over straight away. Within 2 weeks, they were going to be there. 2 weeks to arrange it, and they were coming over. So I told my father. He was upset. So he's still really, really hurt by all this. In fact, my mother told me that I shouldn't tell him. And I said to her, "It's my father. I know my father. He wants to know. He'll want to know. He may not like it, but he'll want to know what's going on. He'd rather know and be upset than not know. I know my father will. I know my father well enough for that." Anyway, so 2 weeks of this. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him. And I go, it's going to happen. The day before they're due to arrive, my mum said, "Well, you know how you're going to drive past our place and go straight to your place first? Dad said, can you stop in on our place on the way?" Which was a good sign. So we stopped in on their place on the way, and I had the photo. Fortunately, I had the camera ready. So these were the first photos when my father first met his sister, which he was actually very excited about, it turns out, when he got over everything. So obviously they caught up. Yeah, lots of family stuff and a lot of stuff to catch up on. Missed an awful lot of years. And we had a family reunion, which was really nice. And that's just met all my family there. So that was really good. Then there was a latecomer. So what happened is I put messages in newspapers in Scarborough, trying to find people, and a late letter came in from this Esther. This Esther provided documentation. Here's Esther, that she was actually his sister too. Now it turned out that my father wasn't the first illegitimate child that this Elsie woman had. There was Esther. Now he was quite fond of Esther because he knew Esther as a cousin, but not as a sister. So he instantly warmed to her because he knew her. He did warm to Pauline and the rest of them, but it just took a bit of time. So that was a pretty good story. So that had a good outcome, and that was the end of my story. The rest of it was told by my father.